Within the Vedantic lens of Dharma, there's no such thing as injustice. There's no cosmic judge. It's going to punish you. We're back with another reflection on the daily Vedantic, and today's reflection, I'm calling it No Injustice. Well, you'll see why I'm calling it that in about 2 seconds. But the reflection stems from a great lecture that I was listening to recently. And it was about Dharma. So Dharma is one of these grand Sanskrit words that can mean, you could fill 2 pages of English words that the word Dharma can mean depending on the context. It also means all of them. Dharma can mean law, it means nature, it means duty, it means truth. Dharma is all of these. What is so interesting about that is in the West, we think law and nature are separate. Sometimes to tie them together, we have to say laws of nature. We think of truth separate from law or separate from nature. We think of nature as separate from duty. We think these linguistically, conceptually, just names and forms that we sliced up and separated. But you go back 5,000 years ago, and within this timeless philosophy, in terms of continuous study, the oldest philosophy known to humans, you go back to these 4 ancient textbooks, the Vedas, which Vedanta comes from. Dharma is all of these things. Dharma is all of these. There is little to no distinction between duty, nature, law. There was this great lecture by this teacher, Vedantic, and as he was talking about Dharma, he mentioned something that was, I had never heard put in this perspective, but it's a beautiful articulation. Within the Vedantic lens of Dharma, there's no such thing as injustice. This world, according to this philosophy, take it or leave it. What's so beautiful about this philosophy is it's like a buffet. You can take it or leave parts of it. Very different than how I grew up Roman Catholic, where that was a pejorative term. It's not a buffet. You got to take it all wholesale. But with a philosophy, this isn't a credo. There are no thou shalt nots. There are no rules that you need to follow, rites, no rituals, just a philosophical explanation of the way things is. The way it all is. And within this philosophy, the articulation of the way things is. There's a reason that it's articulated the way things is and not the way things are. But within this philosophy, there is no view of injustice in the world. This is impossible in a worldview where there's a cosmic judge that decides the punishment for each of us. This is impossible in a world where a murderer can get off scot-free from a judge that didn't see all of the evidence. In these worldviews, justice might not always prevail. But in a worldview where there is no cosmic judge deciding these things, but a worldview where there is just isness, a non-dual view of the world where there is just an unfolding of Dharma, a world, a universe that is governed by truth, law, nature, all being the same thing. It's like trying to fit in an injustice into math. It's like trying to fit in something that doesn't work into a mathematical equation. Math is math. 2 plus 2 does not equal 7. You can say it does. You can say there's an injustice. in math, and that 2 plus 2 shouldn't equal 7, and it does. But from the absolute perspective of a mathematician, they say, no, you're saying there is an injustice of 2 plus 2 equals 7, and it shouldn't, but it doesn't equal 7. It's all conceptual in your head. It actually works itself out quite nicely mathematically. 2 plus 2 does not equal 7. Or a concept within nature of you have 100 marbles and 99 are following the law of gravity, but one isn't. Gravity is being partial to these 99, but it's not paying any attention to this 100. That is not how nature works. Gravity is impartial. That's a lot like, metaphorically, that's a lot like Dharma. It is impartial. It is not partial to some and impartial to others. Law, nature, Dharma exerts its force on everything equally. This point from this episode is going to be quite controversial. Seems like every headline in the news these days is about injustice. Our Western worldview of a cosmic mediator that needs to keep track of everything is almost necessarily consumed with a worry of, what if not everything is being kept track of? What if something slips through the gaps? This worry is made even worse when we get rid of that cosmic judge and it's humans that need to do all of the accounting, all of the auditing of justice and injustice. And we know quite well things fall through all of the cracks of our visibility. In a dharmic view of the world, and this reflection might be helpful to watch the last 2 episodes building up to this one, because they really help build a 360-degree view on this topic of injustice and this philosophical view of there not being any injustice in this world. Something that seems so counter to, like I said, every headline that seems to suggest the opposite. When you take the cosmic judge out and you just lean on humans watching everything, then that fear grows even more of, what if a murderer gets off scot-free? But this philosophy is so clear. And it says, you are not punished for the sin. You're punished by the sin. You put your hand in a fire. There's no cosmic judge. It's going to punish you. You have a burned hand now. You don't need human judge to punish you for an idiotic mistake. You have a burned hand now. Similarly, anyone that takes another's life, innocent for selfish gain, is going to suffer from the mental agitation built within. Stealing, lying, any of these, anything for selfish gain, is going to have its own built-in repercussion. It is part of nature. If it's doing it out of duty, you might steal out of duty. Many people throughout history have killed out of duty. Lying out of duty. It takes 30 seconds to imagine, 10 seconds to imagine a scenario where you might need to lie out of duty. Canonical example is the people keeping Anne Frank and her family safe. That produces no mental agitation because it is unselfish. But this philosophy is very clear. Anything done out of selfishness will create mental agitation. You don't need a cosmic judge. You don't need a terrestrial judge. It is built into the law. Now, the caveat to this, because it makes so much sense if you say, okay, well, this person was born wealthy in a peaceful country. This person was born and died by the time they were 3 in a war-torn country. This perspective Again, you can take it or leave. You don't have to. You can leave this on the shelf. This makes no sense to you. But this perspective does have a prerequisite view of reincarnation. This doesn't just start the day you're born. There is a lineage of cause and effect before that leads up to the setting in which you're born. In this scenario, or the setting in which you're born in the war-torn country. And I get that for a Western audience, that is a lot to swallow. Reincarnation, lack of justice. But this point doesn't work without that. I will say, we think, and it is our projection, it is our own attachments that project and ascribe value to different scenarios that someone is born in. You might say, well, this person's born in a peaceful country, but they might have mental agitation their entire life, suffer from substance abuse, from a criminal scenario, or maybe they grow up in a world where they're given everything that they think they want, and that makes them go crazy. Ferrari at 16 is hardly a active or exercise in mental wealth. But it is also a projection to think that someone born in an undesirable circumstance is therefore a victim of injustice. Our family grew up near a neighbor that had Down syndrome. And Luke was probably the happiest, most continually happy person in our neighborhood. And I have family members that have known nothing but unhappiness, but no one would say they were born in an unjust scenario. Very few people would view the world in which they're born in and say, oh, that was unjust. So, from the practical sense, it's worth calling out, it's a projection of our own desires and attachments to ascribe value of one setting or another someone is born in. But this topic cannot be covered without also adding in this idea that it doesn't just start the day someone's born. And that thread requires me to also say reincarnation is not the cartoonish version we're told, in many ways infantilized by the British Empire when they controlled and took over India. They infantilized the philosophy of the people that they were trying to control, making it about a caricaturized version of, you're going to come back as a cockroach. Undoubtedly, some people may have thought that misinterpretation of reincarnation. But the British control depended on them infantilizing, coming up with the most caricaturized version of this timeless philosophy. To say that's babbling of humanity at its infancy, maybe graduate to our Western Christian views. Instead of 3,000 gods, well, there's only one all-powerful God. Caricaturizing, I studied Hinduism for probably 2 weeks in social sciences in 7th grade in Texas. Just got the caricaturized version of what I thought. I thought it was 3,000, 4,000 gods. How silly was that? A guy with an elephant head made no sense. Didn't get any of the depth of it. And not knowing that it's actually, the Hindu philosophy is the oldest monotheistic philosophy in the world that we know of. Monotheistic, not polytheistic. We look at the Greeks as the wellspring of Western philosophy, and that was actually polytheistic. Hindu philosophy, monotheistic, just happens to be divinized everywhere throughout humanity. God is not just monotheistic. And the Advaita Vedantic view, this school of philosophy goes even further than monotheistic. It's non-dual, meaning there isn't just a belief in God. There is the belief that all of this is God. There is only God. is the only thing to believe in. This is technically, and I mean by like Stanford School of Philosophy, technical academic definition, technically non-theistic. Meaning there is no external monotheistic deity. Non-theistic, meaning there is no theistic deity. There just is isness, this existence itself. And within this isness, this continual existence, there's cause and effect from this relative perspective that we're in right now. But within this misapprehension of dualism, not the ultimate truth of non-dualism, but this misapprehension of dualism, you and me being separate, me being separate from the divine, all of these pluralities in the world around us where we are told there is unity. In this perspective of all of these pluralities, the symbolic, the philosophical lens on reincarnation is not that you die and you come back, die in 1972 and you come back in 1973. There is no static time. There's no static timeline in which you go away from and come back, go away from and come back. It is more like the dream experience, where it is a continual stream. There is nothing but right now. The idea that there was a 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, 5 lifetimes ago is the mind projecting that out. Just like in the dream, you're in a room and you say, well, of course I'm in this room. This makes sense. And you start to project, came from that room. And before that, I was out there, outside in the driveway. But that's all unfolding, almost like the carpet unfolding, the ground unfolding right beneath your feet as you walk. It's a projection. The philosophical view on reincarnation is we are constantly reincarnating into a new moment. A moment has a birth, an existence, a death. Birth, existence, death. Birth, existence, death. Every moment of every life, of every experience is just this constant creation and destruction of this present moment. Wait 2 moments in. The moment just before is now destroyed, is gone. That is the philosophical backdrop on this topic of injustice. And this is not meant to be a cold, compassionless view on someone suffering. But to think, oh, that suffering is caused by someone else, is to remove that person's agency. To think, oh, that person's suffering just because I would suffer in that moment, is projection. To think I can save them from suffering, that is ego. And to think that the world is filled with people anointed with joy, some anointed with suffering, that is misapprehension. You can think it, believe it. You can think all of those things, but they are not nature. They are not the law. They are not the truth, according to this philosophy anyhow. You can think all of those things. You can think them about yourself. It is an injustice that this, or this happened in my life. And yet the 3 daily practices of this philosophy are to question everything. Don't take anything for granted. And to study and reflect daily. On that second one, don't take anything for granted. Maybe that suffering that you thought was inconceivable, if you can stretch your mind to not take it for granted, find a gratitude for it, maybe it was the greatest blessing you could have ever received. But it's your choice. You can go on thinking. There are victims that are helpless, that need you to intervene, or else injustice will win out. You can think that. And many of us do. But that would be an illusion. That's today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.